Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at those individuals who have either Venus squaring Jupiter or Venus opposing Jupiter in their natal chart. And I want to give a shout out to astrologyking.com. This is where I kind of gathered my information, and it's interesting because either in the past, I used to use books a lot to gain information. And of course, with the way that things have transpired, it's more likely that a lot of us are probably getting astrological information online. But as some of you have commented to me, it sometimes is difficult to get much information about a specific aspect in astrology that you're looking for. And I don't mean a literal aspect like this is an aspect, but just any particular area of astrology. I've had people say that about one of my videos, that they couldn't find much information about it. I can't remember what it was. So that's the situation I found when I was trying to gather information about Venus squaring or opposing Jupiter. Now, the squares and oppositions are hard angles, which means that they create challenges between those two planets and what they're intending to do, because that's the whole idea of aspects in the first place, is that depending on, what two planets are involved, they create an energy by coming together, depending on the angle that is involved. And of course, there are many planets that do not make contact with one another when you're looking at your chart. So don't think that this is always happening. It's not. If you have the square, I read on more than one site that this is probably the best square that you could have, for all your aspects. And the reason is because these two planets are considered benefic planets. That's a term that I think is used in Vedic astrology more than anything else. But it just means that Venus and Jupiter are considered so positive that when they come together, even if it's like challenging, it still is going to be a lot better than if you have something like Mars squaring Pluto, for instance. And the other angle of that, pardon the pun, is that there's that sense of when you're trying to deal with a problem, what can be the problem? Well, it can be like too much of a good thing. So it's like, even if we think it's challenging, it still is coming from a good place. And if we look at these two planets separately, we can kind of get a feel for what is going on here, because you think about Venus. What do you think about? You think about pleasure. You think about ease, harmony, love, creativity. And Jupiter is about blessings, expansion, more of something. But it can be excess because it's more of. More of can mean abundance, but we can also use the word excess, which is kind of the dark side of abundance, right? So when you combine this, it shouldn't be surprising to see that this contact that is made can produce a love of excess. So a self-indulgent nature. And Venus can also be about fun. I think Jupiter can be. I think both of those planets can be. So it can still give that person the desire for fun, but since life is not just about that, it can create a sense of, with the square, this obstacle where the person may need to get something done and they don't want to. I'm actually surprised that I don't have this square because I can totally relate to this feeling. The person is looking for freedom. That's what Jupiter is all about. But they may find that their behavior is actually preventing that, or their love of pleasure can be excessive. And it brings to mind this book that I had, and it was called The Yoga of Discipline. And I wonder if it's still in print, but it was all about how discipline gives us freedom. And we think of doing something repetitively as being really boring or something like that. But even, like, for instance, a yoga practice, the more that you do it, the more that you reap the benefits and the more that it improves your life. But in the moment, it can feel kind of oppressive that you, quote unquote, have to do something. And if people applied this to different areas of life, even washing the dishes, whatever it is that they have to do, it would actually free them up to do the things that really light them up. So it almost makes me think of like a big kid with this square or opposition that feels like, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that, and maybe actually tries to avoid doing those things. Are they going to feel free in that case? No, because they really have it hanging over their heads. They know that eventually they're going to have to do the laundry. They're going to have to sweep the floor. Or if you have a job that involves any kind of mundane activities. Now, if we look at life as something that we can devise for ourselves, it makes sense to say that it would be a good idea to look for work or create your own business where you get to play a lot. And by play, I'm talking about things that we consider fun, like creation, anything creative. That is something where it's like children are naturally creative. They will pick up a paper and start drawing, scribbling. You don't have to force them to do it. Usually, I would assume. But sometimes even people who are talented artistically may not be able to support themselves right off the bat from something like that. So they may get some kind of a job where it might not be the most scintillating thing that they're doing. If you can find in that type of work some semblance of freedom, maybe you can work from home, maybe you can choose your own hours, that may make up for the lack of excitement in that type of environment. And you would still be working on your passion project on the side, knowing that that is where your heart really lies. They use the word fiction on astrologyking.com because the square produces friction. And with this placement, you can feel maybe that irritation of, having all these desires, that involve luxury or wanting to be entertained constantly, doing things for fun. That's all associated. I would say specifically with Venus, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jupiter is connected to that as well. But how do you do that when you need to have a certain amount of money? So that can lead to somebody who feels caught in that trap with the pleasure principle and the real world, if you will. that requires money to do those things. And what is interesting here is that they mention about being perceived as having loose morals. And I assume why they say this is because Venus can connect to your value, or well, both of these. Venus can be what you value, and Jupiter can be morals, because Jupiter rules the ninth house, which is the God house, and religion, organized religion, the dogma of religion, and your philosophical framework, ethics. The law can be part of the ninth house. So when you have a hard angle, be it a square or opposition, you may, especially I think if you're motivated by certain desires that can be at odds with, morality. And it's a very interesting thing. Also look to Pluto. If somebody has Venus squaring Pluto, I sometimes get a little bit tricky here when I'm trying to tie it in with other things, because Pluto is a generational planet, but Venus is very fast moving. I'm just saying, like, there's a hard angle to Jupiter and to Pluto. How would that work? Well, that could be something that the person marries somebody for money so that they can have a certain type of lifestyle that they don't necessarily want to work hard to do on their own. Something along those lines, where the person has to fund their lavish lifestyle. And you just may not have that kind of motivation to do it. And this is something that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to earning money, is that not everybody is motivated to earn money if it involves hard work. And yet they still may be materialistic to a certain degree. You may be a very generous person. And, here's something that can be generous to a fault, and that can lead to depleting your resources as well. One thing that I could have sworn that I have seen before, but I couldn't find online, maybe it's in one of my books, is this idea of the excess in relationships. And I would say especially with the opposition between Venus and Jupiter. So this idea of maybe sometimes overdoing the emotions. Maybe I'm thinking of the moon and Jupiter, but I think Venus and Jupiter, it can work that way as well, where it's like over the top, being too excessive with relationships, and maybe even money coming into it, where you kind of like shower your beloved with gifts. And maybe at a deeper level, there could be some kind of desire to keep that person there, almost like you're buying their love. So think about that as well, because that can cause financial problems for yourself, but it can also attract the kind of person that is a taker and not somebody who will give back to you, maybe not in the same way, but in some way, that energy exchange. And they mentioned the square being good for being motivated to create, because when you think about it, when you have this kind of friction, it actually can be a catalyst for doing something, because you have that motivation. A trine and a sextile, those are very harmonious angles, But the problem is that they're so easy, in terms of manifestation, that can make a person, if somebody has a lot of trines or sextiles in their chart, they may take things for granted because things come so easily to them. And if somebody has a lot of squares, I had a fellow astrologer tell me this once, a lot of squares or oppositions, it can be like a real catalyst for that person to achieve things in life. And so they may not get things handed to them, and there could be a lot of stumbling blocks and obstacles and hurdles, but they feel that sense of impetus to do something about it. With this opposition, we're talking about relationships a lot of times, because there's a projection. There's you, there might be another person. And is there any kind of, I was going to say common ground, but I mean this sense of balance, because an opposition can indicate an extreme situation. And you may have an extreme attitude towards something that is very important to you, like a cause. But you may not get that kind of receptivity from others, and that could be frustrating. I would say, though, overall, I mean, one of the things they say is that you're a very popular person, regardless. And the thing is, in relationships, is not to be so easygoing that another person can control you in any way. So, Venus is always it's like Venus rules the signs of Taurus and Libra. So when you think about, for instance, a Libra person who always wants to be accepted, or who doesn't want conflict, who wants there to be harmony, that is a quality of Venus. It's funny because I don't think that way about Taurus as much, even though it's also ruled by Venus. For some reason, I really see it show up with Libra individuals. And I wonder if it's because Libra is a cardinal sign, and at the core of their being, Libra people are very ambitious. I don't know if that's it, and they're very goal oriented, so they're looking for that. Maybe they're looking for that cooperation from other people, and they feel like the best way, like you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. I don't know if it's something like that. I mean, I'm sure that's part of it, but Libra people want that kind of let's see, approval. And so this opposition can show up that way, I think, and that can lead to other people who might sense that within you, and they exploit it. So that's how they can control you, knowing what it is that you need. But this can still make you a popular person. And you may desire that kind of social acceptance, and you might be quite social in general. And so that is very meaningful to you. But a term used on this site is free spirit, and saying that you are a free spirit. That specifically, I think, is coming from Jupiter, because Jupiter wants freedom. So even in relationships, there has to be that give and take. You need that freedom. And, you're going to feel very put upon if you're in a relationship with somebody who is very, authoritarian. And this could apply to the workplace too. If you have a boss who never lets you have a day off, or uh, isn't lenient in terms of like, hey, yeah, you can be more flexible with the schedule if you want, or I don't need you to show up punctually. You don't have to like show up exactly at 9 o'clock. You can come in a little bit later. That works so much better for you than somebody that dictates, because you're going to feel very suffocated in that type of environment. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.